Well, I couldn't be more thrilled, Carey, to welcome you back to Win today. Thanks for taking the time for me.
Thanks, Christopher. It's so good to be with you. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the work you're doing.
I appreciate you so much. And, Carey, you've just returned from having taken the entire month of July off. I just want to ask, how was it? How are you doing?
It was great. It was my first month without cheating. You know, the cheater vacation a lot of driven people do where, just an hour of email in the morning or, the working vacation. I've done working vacations where I've tried to write a book in the morning and then play around in the afternoon, or, hey team, I'm on, but you can reach me at the beach. And we didn't do any of that this time around. And it was great. It was really good. It was a full month off. And I've also done the fake vacation where I thought I have taken a month off before, but it was when I stepped back as a lead pastor of a church, the church I founded, and we went to Australia. But like I had a speaking tour for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks at the beach. So it was like a full month off, probably for the first time since I was in elementary school, which was a long time ago. It was great. And I think I'll do it more often and would love to help other people try to figure out how to really take a break. Doesn't have to be a month, could be a week, could be, 2 weeks or something like that. But it was great. Just relaxed, had fun, saw family, went out on the water a lot. We love that. And managed the never-ending construction project in my backyard, which was the surprise of the month off. It'll be done soon.
It's been so fun to watch it on Instagram. And, Carey, I suppose the reason I just wanted to ask you about that is because I love watching your life and I respect you so much. But it really points the head toward the topic center of today's conversation, because it just seems like overwhelm and exhaustion is not only normal these days, but sadly, and I'm raising my hand on this one, guys, at times worn as a badge of honor. And I just want to step into a quote from your book, which arrested me just a couple pages in, Carey. And in it, you wrote, according to a study of 7,500 full-time American employees, more than 70% of adults in their 20s and 30s are experiencing at least some level of burnout. That means a stunning number of young adults, you wrote, are feeling worn out from work and life before they hit their 40th birthday, Carey. And the reason that arrested me is because I'm 38. And I told you before we hit record here, I'm just feeling it. And I'm trying to get a little solidarity in my soul. I want to get behind that statistic as we start today. Why do you believe this is happening at an accelerated rate?
It definitely is an accelerated rate. I follow the work of Jean Twenge from the University of San Diego. I've interviewed her for my podcast, and she would say it's epidemic performance or epidemic proportions and unprecedented in terms of generation. She's never seen a statistical spike in anxiety, depression, exhaustion, burnout as she has in the last 15 years. So what's fueling that? Number of things. I burned out. So, the book tells a little bit, not a lot. It's mostly a stay out of burnout book, not a here's the burnout story, but how to make sure you don't end up there. It's that kind of book. But I burned out 15 years ago, and I did it without smartphones. I had a BlackBerry at the time. And I mean, if you really wanted to access the internet on a BlackBerry, you had to work at it, man. Like it was work. It didn't do a good job. Now we have devices that bring us everywhere. So let's talk about being overwhelmed. Here's a trivia question for you.
I love it.
How many friends, scientifically, this is the work of a researcher, a British evolutionary psychologist. He makes the argument that you are, by design, limited to a certain number of friends. Any idea how many friends one person can have sustainably?
Like effectively?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I canvass my life, Carey, I'd say in terms of deep, meaningful, mutual, value-adding relationships, 10?
Yeah.
12?
Yeah, he would agree.
Okay.
He says, Robin Dunbar is a psychologist. He talks about 3 to 5 best friends, like super close friends. They know everything about you. They know your secrets. They show up at your house and they have refrigerator rights. They can just walk right in and eat whatever they want. He says you have about 3 to 5 people that you can really know at that level. And then he would expand that circle to what you were saying, 12 to 15 friends. You know a lot about their life. They know a lot about you. You're probably checking in at least once a month. But then he caps the number, which is the real surprise, at 150 for the number of people that you can actually know well. And these are the people, if you still send Christmas cards, you send Christmas cards to. These are the people it's like, oh, yeah, I know Chris. He lives in the Detroit area and he does this. And, this is, their kids' names, dogs' names, that kind of thing. But beyond that, he says, we do not as human beings, and he's not a Christian, but he says, we do not have the ability to really meaningfully know anyone beyond that. And so he traces that to brain development. He traces that to the way we've organized ourselves historically. In medieval villages, the average size town was about 150 to 200 people. You look at the average church, below 200 people. You look at the way we organize the military, right? Companies, so on and so forth. It's always squadrons, because if you have 1,000 people, you can't have a meaningful relationship. Now, that's not an argument against large organizations or mega churches. It's just saying it pushes the strains. And he wrote this seminal work back in 2010. And he even at that time said social networks are starting to strain the amount of people that we have. Well, fast forward a decade and a bit, and all of a sudden now you're at the point where I don't think there's a single listener of this podcast that has fewer than 150 people following them on social or who have access to them on social. So as a result, every time you look at your device, somebody wants something new. Every time you look at your phone, you have a new opportunity. Every time, if you're a parent, it's like, well, your kids could do this or your kids could do that. And then you have the shame and the guilt of like not doing that. And so I think technology, and I'm a technology fan, but it comes with a real edge, actually has the ability to completely overwhelm us. And it's left me at times feeling completely overwhelmed. And then you work into overworked and overcommitted. Overworked, you used to go to the office, but now the office goes to you. Right. So you can, while watching Netflix at night or Disney Plus with your kid, you can answer texts from work. You didn't used to be able to do that a generation ago. And then overcommitted, when you have, 15 requests coming at you every day. Hey, are you free to do this fun run with me next Saturday? Hey, can you do this? Hey, can you do this? You just overcommit. And so that digital access, like digital has bad manners that people don't. People can have bad manners, but digital is like, I can text you any time of the day or night, and people do. And so I think that is one of the reasons we're so overwhelmed. And then we don't have boundaries to know how to say no.
Yeah, I that's super visceral, Carey. And one of the things, I'd love to stay here for a moment because you mentioned shame and guilt, and back to the research study, 3 to 5 people who really know who you are. Well, when we're inundated, I'm just going to string this together probably in a poor fashion, but I just like to suspect that we can't hide when we're truly overwhelmed and not at our best from those 3 to 5. But when we find ourselves inundated in this boundaryless bevy of digital connection, digital communication, building platforms, running from event to event, we can have monologues with people, but we don't slow down enough to have dialogues where people get to know us. Any thoughts on the connection between that?
Well, I think it's huge. I think conversation is a dying art.
Yeah.
And I think our souls are starving. We just got together with good friends of ours that we've known. My wife and her friend went to kindergarten together. They met at our wedding. So these are like decades-long friendships. And I've known Lou since we were both students at the University of Toronto. And Lou's one of the best people I know at asking questions. In fact, it's very hard to get a word in edgewise because he'll say, so Carey, how's your family? So Carey, how are the kids? So Carey, how are your parents? So what are you making about your new book? What about this? What about that? It's like, Lou, let me ask you a few questions. That is dying. And, there's something a counselor told me years ago. He said, Carey, all relationships are mutual. Yeah. In other words, and a lot of people in leadership, this is a leadership podcast, right? So a lot of people in leadership, you're not in a place where you have mutual relationships. You're often in a caregiving role. So if you work at a church, You're in a caregiving role. You're giving. It's not very mutual. Yeah. If you work in a company and you're a leader, you're caring for the employees. You're responsible for the bottom line. You're responsible for the development of other people. And what that does is it creates a real imbalance in your life. And add to that, I do think conversation is a lost art. And as a culture, we're not very good at checking in with other people. Conversation used to be, Chris, how are you doing? Good. How are you doing, Carey? Great. Okay, tell me something interesting that's going on in your life. Blah, blah, blah. You tell me. And you say, how about you? And I'm like, yeah. Now, often when you get together, notice this. It'll just be like, hey, Christopher, it's good to see you. Yeah, I do a podcast too, and blah, 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 blah. Oh, and let me tell you about the renovations in my backyard. And, oh, yeah, did I tell you I'm almost at 2,000 kilometers on Strava for cycling? And, oh, yeah, I'm going to Atlanta. And you're just like, I didn't ask you any of that.
Yeah.
Like, you just dumped on me. It's like we're doing these content dumps on people. And that's not how we're wired or programmed, but that's where our culture is at. And so when you have mutual, life-giving relationships, when they're back and forth and you listen as much as you speak and you're as or more interested in the other person than you are in yourself, that's when relationships become life-giving. Those 3 to 5 should look like that. Those 150 should basically look like that. And everybody else, you ever feel like this as a leader? Everybody just wants a piece of me. You ever feel like that?
Most definitely. And I mean, just to be candid here, and you all know, listening to the podcast right now, we've talked about this. I mean, it's moved me to the point of tears, especially through the last year, because I just want to sit and just talk to somebody and be heard. And, Ben Higgins from The Bachelor was on the podcast, and he talked about Carey being seen but not known. And I'm like, that is such a great distillation of that feeling.
It is. And so many people, we're all seen, but we're not really known. And I wonder if that's playing in to the conversational dynamic lately, where when people get together, it's just kind of a content dump. We're treating real life relationships like social media. Instead of posting to Instagram, I'll post to you. Instead of posting to TikTok, I'll post to you. And that is not a recipe for a life-giving relationship. So you look at that, you're just drained by the people around you, and lots of draining people. I was surprised. I led a church for a couple of decades, and back when the church was small enough that people would see me for counseling, until I'm finally like, you should see a professional. Okay, don't see me. But they would come into the office, and I would barely know their name. And they would offload this just life-shattering truth, right? Marriage is in the toilet, or I'm having an affair, or whatever that happened to be. And I would always ask them, like, well, who are you talking to about this? And they would say no one. And when I got to know them a little bit better and I drilled down, it would be clear they don't have any friends. Like, people don't have any friends. And so I think all of this is combining into the reality of overwhelmed, overworked, overcommitted. Plus, we have these devices in our pocket that chirp and vibrate and ring and buzz. And it's work and it's life, and it's work and it's life at 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. And it's just overwhelming. It's a cacophony.
It's really interesting what you said, and it makes me think about the learned behavior of conversation and how we're learning it, because I read this study last week, and in fact, a couple of friends and I were talking about how Instagram's business model is slowly changing to more video than photo, and more Gen Z are skipping the stories and going right to Reels. So I'm wondering, like, are we learning our conversation behavior from Reels, and are we saying, oh, people just want a Reel? Oh. And in fact, I'm going to say this, guys. Carey Nieuwhof's leadership podcast was episode 435, if I'm not mistaken, with Gene Twenge. I'm going to link to that in the show notes, because that was a conversation to have a listen and another listen. So, Carey, it's both sobering and a little sad.
It is sad, because I think our souls, like at a deep level, we do want to be known, and we have the desire to know other people. It's not like, oh, give me my 15 minutes, right? But like, I need to know. And social media creates a false intimacy, because if you think about Dunbar's number, right? You really can know 3 to 5 people very well, and 10 to 15 people quite well. And 150 people, it's like, hey, good to see you again, right? Like that is for real how human beings thrive. And what's happened now is social media and your phone doesn't differentiate between your mom and the guy you went to high school with who messaged you that you haven't heard from in a decade versus your boss, right? It's just 3 messages that came in.
Yeah.
But the people closest to us should get the most meaningful response. And what often happens is you're busy talking to the guy that you went to high school with who you don't really have that much of an interest. You're not even sure, is this like a multi-level marketing thing or what is he into, right? So you will sometimes give him more time than you give your mom. Well, you should be giving your mom more time. You should be giving your daughter more time. You should be giving your best friend more time. And a lot of us, it's the people closest to us who pay the steepest price because of that. And we're so busy all the time, and we're never really off to reflect on it, that we don't even understand that that's happening to us in the midst of it.
Carey, you just said the people closest to us pay the steepest price. In fact, I want to spring off of that, take us back to 2006.
Yeah.
Because all of us can relate to the fact that we've normalized overwhelm, we've normalized the overwork, the stress, and it's scary because after a while, we just don't know where it started, and so we don't know how to deal with it. And then we say things like, I'm just crushing it in life, but life's actually crushing us. So take us back to 2006, sort of a case study for this conversation, Carey, and to the extent you're comfortable sharing.
Oh, yeah.
What happened? How did you deal with it?
So 2006, I was 11 years into leadership. I was 41. So I spent my 20s in school. I did law, then theology, also did history. So it was a long time to get into the workforce, and started at these tiny churches, like just a handful of people at each of them. And we started to experience growth to the point where by 2006, we were one of the largest churches nationally in our denomination. We were the fastest growing in our denomination, all of that. So suddenly, building campaigns, new people. We were under 1,000, but in Canada, that's a huge church. And I didn't know how to handle it. I had a terrible equation, which is more people equals more hours. And because I was in ministry and I'm a person of faith, you feel like you're being unfaithful if you don't serve all these people by working more hours. Meanwhile, I had, boys who were growing up and moving into their middle school years. And like every marriage, we had some challenges, and my chronic overworking and drive and addiction to success and performance were really kind of doing a work inside me to the point where I was slowly imploding, but I couldn't see it. So when I was in my late 30s, people kept telling me, Carey, slow down, you're going to burn out. And I didn't believe it. I thought burnout was for weak people. I thought burnout wouldn't happen to me. I thought the rules wouldn't apply to me until, of course, they did. And at 41, it's like my body declared a finish line. I wouldn't declare a finish line, so my body did. Yep. And it's like I woke up and if you had talked to me the day before I burned out, and it was almost that sudden, it was almost like overnight, you would have said, Carey, how you doing? I'm like, great, man, really fast growing church. I had just actually spoken at a church in Atlanta in front of 2,500 leaders from around the world. It was like I'd just been at the Super Bowl and just won. And I woke up and it was like I got hit by a truck. My passion was gone. My energy was gone. I'm a pretty energetic person. I probably started to struggle with the symptoms of depression. I had brain fog like you wouldn't believe. And of course, I think for a living. So that wasn't very good. Yeah. And my life just ground to a crashing halt. And I burned out. And so that's what happened in 2006. And that's happening, you quoted that stat where 70% of millennials and Gen Z are saying they're feeling burned out. I read a Deloitte study from mid-2021, so this is very current. You would think our world is getting easier. It's not.
Right.
82% of senior executive CEOs go home feeling mentally and physically exhausted every day. They're just, the day starts, they have a bit of energy. By 5 o'clock when it's time to go home, they're exhausted. And I think a lot of people live that way. So I recovered from burnout, and my hope with At Your Best, the new book, is that I can help leaders avoid burnout. And if you're in it, to get out of it and then stay out of it in the future, because now it's been 15 years. I almost feel like it's a little bit like AA. It's been 15 years since I had a drink, right? It's been 15 years since I burned out. And I think there are systems you can put at work in your life that will help you live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow, which is my hope with At Your Best.
And folks, you can go to wintoday.tv/episode 257 right now. A link is in the show notes to get a copy of Carey's brand new book, which is so good and so needed. Carey, I want to stay there for just a moment because you said it started to creep into your life in your late 30s. Well, that's me. And there are a lot of listeners here today who are in the same season of life as me. And I'd love to know, if you could kind of rewind the tape, are there some warning signs that you unintentionally ignored that you'd be able to identify today to say, Chris and everyone else, watch out for this, or perhaps I wasn't managing this well? Anything specific that would add value to me?
Yeah. So, no surprise, I'm not a medical doctor. So please, please don't,
Certainly.
Please understand that. But yeah, here's some signs I'd be watching for before you burn out. In fact, I think a lot more people are burned out than realize it. So look for feeling numb, that inappropriate emotional response. So life is a series of highs and lows. Highs being, hey, did you hear so-and-so's pregnant? Oh, that's awesome. Good for them, right? Lows being, this person just got diagnosed with cancer. So what should be happening in those moments is you should be feeling the highs and feeling the lows. The highs being, I'm really genuinely excited for them, and the lows being, that's awful. And what happens when you're burning out is you don't feel the emotion. You just feel numb. And most of us are socially intelligent enough and have enough muscle memory that we can fake it, right? Like, oh, that's so great. True. But inside, nothing. Another thing is when you feel emotions, they're disproportionate. So the little things make you crazy. So I'm redoing my garage. My dream is I park 2 cars in there this fall. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've got it's beautiful new floor in it and everything. The walls are painted. My garage has baseboards.
It's beautiful.
So that's a little nuts. And I have a labeler for all the Rubbermaid totes. So I've gone a little bit postal on that one. But I got these new garbage cans that our municipality wants us to use, and they're too big. They're giant. It's like, who do you think I am? Like an army? They're big, and they're kind of messing with my garage plan. So now I have to come up with a new plan on how to store everything. And I've been thinking about this for months, probably not very helpfully thinking about it for months. So anyway, when I'm unhealthy, that would be ballistic. I'd call the municipality and yell at them or whatever. Now I look at that, I'm in a healthier season, and I'm like, it's a minor thing. I'll figure this out. I'm not worried about it. We can make it fit, right? So the response is proportionate to the problem. Recycling containers that are a little bit too big are not the end of the world. But if you're burning out, you think they're the end of the world. And on the other hand, something that might be the end of the world, you're like, yeah, I'm not worried about it. This guy's going to leave staff. Okay, let him go. That's a sign of burnout. Another one, you don't laugh anymore. Another one, sleep and rest no longer refuel you. There should be a cause and effect in sleep and rest. I'm tired. Everybody gets tired. Even if you're not burning out, you're tired. You go to bed early. You wake up the next day. You feel a bit better. You go to bed early the next day, and then you're like, okay, I'm back. Or you take time off. You take a weekend off, a week off, and you're like, yep, I got fire in the belly and fuel in the tank, ready to go. When you're burned out, that there's no cause and effect there anymore. Another sign is that you start to self-medicate. So that can be alcohol or drugs, obviously, but it can also be overworking. Workaholism is a form of medication, and so is overeating. So being a person of faith, I wouldn't turn to alcohol, I wouldn't turn to drugs, but I would turn to, I'll just work some more. So the very thing that's making you sick is what you are doing to try to get better or to cope with not getting better. Or I would hit the fridge.
It's interesting, Carey, you said a moment ago, one of the things that we say is, it's just a season, I'll plow through it. And then we trick ourselves into believing that we don't need to address what's under the hood. And I think that's one of the things I loved that you identified in your book. For a lot of us, one of the lies we believe is it is just a season. So how do we confront that mindset like head on and then reframe absolute truth that's going to set us on a path to freedom?
Well, you got to start telling yourself the truth. Because I used to say when my friends were, how you doing? It's like, busy, man, but just a busy season. It's a busy season. And eventually I have good friends and good family. They started calling me on it.
Okay.
And they're like, you said that last time. You said that last time. And finally I'm like, they're right. And seasons have beginnings and endings, Chris. And if your busy season has no ending, it's not a season, it's your life. And for a lot of us, it's like, oh yeah, I've been saying that for 5 years. It's like, there is no end. Guys, this is not a season. This is now your life. So there's that. The other thing, and I had to, there's some tough love that I had to give myself and try to encourage other leaders to find as well, is we have to start telling the truth about time, because we lie about time all the time. So think about this, right? I want to write a book. I want to write a book, but I don't have the time to write a book. Or I want to run a marathon, or I want to run a 5K, but I don't have time to exercise. Or I didn't have time to get that project done, Chris. Sorry about that. I didn't have enough time to get it done.
Yeah.
All that stuff is a lie. And why is it a lie? Because you had the same amount of time as any other human being on planet Earth, including the person who ran the 5K, ran the marathon, got the project done, and wrote the book. I have as much time as anybody, and those 24 hours in the day are available to me every day. I can use them the way I choose to use them. So I called myself on this around the time that I was recovering from burnout. And I made myself stop saying I didn't have the time and start admitting I didn't make it. So I didn't make the time to work out today. I didn't make the time to tuck my daughter in tonight in bed. I didn't make the time to eat a healthy dinner. I didn't make the time to write that book. And when you start admitting and telling yourself the truth and you take your excuses away, like try this at work. Is the report done? I didn't make the time to do the report is very different than I didn't get a chance to. Do you hear the difference?
It makes my skin crawl a little bit.
It does. Yeah, you have to be careful, right? Because if you're like, hey, Carey, you want to go for lunch? And I'm like, I'm not going to make the time for that, but thanks for asking. You will soon have no friends. So you have to be really careful. So use it as an internal filter. All right. You might say,
that's good.
I'm sorry, given my calendar right now, it's just not going to be possible. You can say that as a no.
Yes.
But what happens is when you start to, you start to listen to your excuses. And when you have to tell yourself at the end of every day, I didn't make time to write the book. Well, are you going to write the book or not? Like, are you going to do it or not?
That's it.
I didn't make the time to eat healthy. I didn't make the time to call my mom. My mom's like, when are you going to call me? I will. I don't have time. When you do that 4 weeks in a row, and you're like, okay, in the last month, I have not made time to call my parents. Not fair. And then you realize, oh, this is the life I'm living, and you get called out. So I would say telling the truth to yourself about time is one way to start making progress.
Carey, what I hear you saying, and folks listening, I think what I want to do is create just a bit of a sticking point before we move on to the conversation here. Carey, what I hear you saying, threading through everything we've talked about so far, is we all need, number one, a healthy dose of self-awareness, but not just self-awareness. Because, guys, we've talked about this. Self-awareness says, yes, I can admit I was texting while driving. But I think it's applied self-knowledge that gets under the hood of the motivation. Why was I doing it in the first place? So, the case of what you said about texting mom. Why didn't I do it for 4 weeks in a row? Well, I need to pause long enough to apply some self-awareness and self-knowledge, Carey, is what I hear you saying, to investigate the priorities of my heart, because it's those deep areas that affect everything I am and everything I do. Did I hear you correctly in that?
Yeah, that's right. I think it is. And then it takes it to a third level. So
Okay.
Daniel Goleman, in his seminal work on emotional intelligence, talks about self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also self-regulation. It's one thing to know, I never make time to work out. It's another thing to say, so what am I going to change in my patterns and behaviors to at least take a walk around the block? Like, how can I budget 30 minutes to do that? Or I just text my mom at 5 o'clock every day, or I call my parents every Sunday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I do, right? So that is self-regulation. Or I'm not going to say those things anymore, and I am going to live differently. You change your patterns, because a lot of people have known that they've had time management issues for years. They haven't done anything about it. And now what's the result? Well, you're more overwhelmed now, and you even know why you're overwhelmed, but you're still overwhelmed. You haven't done anything. So that moves us into self-regulation and behavior change.
All right, so folks, you just heard Carey say it. So one of the key hooks to being at your best is self-awareness and self-regulation. We've got to get honest with ourselves if we're going to move forward in the direction of progress. And, Carey, you were talking about time. I don't have the time. And then the sobering reality of what happens when we look in the mirror and say, actually, I didn't make the time. But I want to stay on time for a moment, because there's this invincibility fallacy that a lot of people my age deal with. I just said to someone yesterday, I cannot believe how quickly 2021 is flying. Now,
yeah, it's going quick.
It's just a perception, right? Because time doesn't change in terms of the speed of time, but it's my perception. And so for me, what that does is exposes a blind spot that I have, just being candid and honest here. It's sometimes when I'm driven in my type A Enneagram 1 personality, drilled down, stay focused, here we go, I buy into the fallacy of invincibility, because we're not guaranteed energy and ability for tomorrow. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that and any advice you'd have therein.
Well, you're moving into a really interesting area with that question, Christopher. So yeah, our time does move really quickly. And most people, I imagine most people who listen to a leadership podcast have thought about and implemented some strategies on time management. Sure. So I'm going to guess that the average listener, the average leader listening, is a decent time manager. And yet that didn't solve overwhelm. So let's crack that code a little bit deeper.
I'd love to.
So there is time management, but also there's energy management. And you've hinted at something, which is you have 24 equal hours in a day, but not all hours feel equal or produce equally.
Yes.
So if you think about it, science would show, and I think this is widely accepted now, it's been my experience, and I've taught this material to thousands of leaders. Most of us have about 3 to 5 productive hours in a day. Mm-hmm. That's it. So we have 24 hours in a day, but only 3 to 5 really produce something awesome. So in my case, I'm a writer these days. I write content. Yep. I prep for podcast interviews like you do. I write books. I write keynotes. I just wrote one for Forbes today, going to deliver that in one of their webinars, right? So what did I do? I took my most energetic hours, which for me are the morning. I'm a morning person. And I worked for 3.5 hours on that Forbes webinar that I'm delivering. Mm-hmm. And I got that done, finished, taken care of. And what happens is a lot of us spend our time, but we spend our energy randomly. So we think about time, we don't think about energy. And that's where the magic started to happen for me. I'm like, I'm basically only good in the morning. And if I have to produce really good content, even when I'm not burned out, right? Brain fog sets in. So let me ask you this question.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Do you have an hour or two most days where you're like, oh, please, someone caffeinate me, or let me take a nap? Or like, do you get a time in the day where you just kind of drag a little bit getting into invincibility?
It's clockwork. It's 2 to 3 p.m. every single day.
2 to 3 every single day. Doesn't matter whether you're having a salad for lunch or you eat like bowls of pasta. You're just tired. And
I've tried to hack it, Carey. I thought, okay, maybe it's a different breakfast. Maybe it's a different sleep thing. And I just realized this is time. In fact, I'm just going to point to your book. This is yellow zone for me.
Okay, so you're starting to get
yellow on the verge of red zone, where I'm going, I just need to stop right now.
Yeah, so that's a helpful framework. I divide the days and suggest people do this into green, yellow, and red zone. It's a form of time blocking. So red zone is mine's 4 to 6 in the afternoon. That's when I'm tired. That's when I'm like, the words are not flowing very quickly. That's when I get a little bit of brain fog. And it's just normal. It means you're not a robot, right? Like, that's why we're supposed to sleep for 7 or 8 hours, 9 hours.
Thank you for saying that real fast, Carey, because I think one of the things is the voice of shame says, if you were better, if you actually had what it takes, you wouldn't hit that slump. You're doing something wrong. Worse, you just aren't the leader you believe you are. So
Winston Churchill arguably helped save the free world in the Second World War.
Yeah.
And every afternoon he would have, I think his baths might have been the afternoon. He had a nap. And his nap wasn't, I dozed off for 2 minutes on my recliner. His nap was you get undressed, you go into bed, and you get up an hour or two later. And you look at some of the great nappers in history, Benjamin Franklin, I mean, in our day, Mike Hyatt, I mean, Ronald Reagan, he would nap in the White House. I have become a napper, and I used to fight. I used to be the, I can only live on 4 hours of sleep a night guy. And that left me burned out. And now one of the things I experimented with in my month off, which we touched on earlier, I wanted to see what my baseline was. Like, what does a fully rested Carey Nieuwhof look like? There was one period. I went into this month off rested.
Okay.
And then about 2 weeks into the actual month-long break, there was a period where I was sleeping 10 or 11 hours a day. And I'm like, what is this? Because I don't normally do that. And scientists would tell you can oversleep for sure. And maybe that was a bit of oversleeping. But I'm not lazy. I mean, I publish books. I fly around the world. I do all kinds of stuff. Like I hustle. But that's telling me most people are chronically underslept. And but even, okay, it's a bit of a digression. Anyway, get your sleep. That's the point. Even if you're fully rested, you're still going to have a red zone in the afternoon. So red zone, for most people, it's afternoon. For some people, it's that first 2 hours in the morning. It's like, I can barely open my eyes, right? Or it's 9 o'clock at night or whatever. But if you think of a work day, green, yellow, red. Green, 3 to 5 hours where you're at your best. Red zone where it's like someone caffeinate me or I'm going to fall asleep. And yellow zone is the time in between. You're not at your best. You're not at your worst. So the key to productivity for me, and what I like to encourage leaders to do, is to do what they're best at when they're at their best. So what are you best at? What's your most important work? What would you say for, the way you spend your days?
Sure.
What are the activities that if you get those done, you're off to the races? What's your most significant work that you do, Chris?
Well, I mean, this isn't my full-time job. I'm
this is your hobby, right?
Exactly. A hobby, and on the way to hopefully, making this a larger place in my life in terms of priorities and such.
Yeah.
But, I manage a team. I look after a department at the church. I'm a pastor at a local church here in the Detroit area. I do coaching and consulting. I write for Success Magazine. I just finished my book proposal and sent that to my agent. So I've got a lot of hands in a lot of pots, but similar domains, leadership, helping people be better, helping people heal, issues of the past, emotional health, mental health, that kind of thing.
Content creation?
Sure.
People management?
Sure.
Anything else?
In a broader sense, I'll say counseling, consulting, but for those in the church world that are listening, it's pastoral care.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good to know. So the question is, what gives you energy and what drains energy? Does creating content give you energy?
Very much so. Routine meetings absolutely zap me. It's like popping a balloon. Just the meetings that drone, and even the regular meetings. I think we are over meetinged as a society.
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned from Michael Hyatt, because I don't love email, but it's a necessary thing, right? So what I do, Carey, is I do my best to get inbox zero in my workday startup, and then I shut down email completely so that I'm able to be steadfast and focused on the things that matter most. So I'm not looking at email throughout the day. I'm looking at it first thing in the morning and at the end of the day again. So twice
Good
a day.
idea.
Yeah.
And do you enjoy meeting with people? Like that's a really strategic use of your time?
I really do, because from a strengths finder perspective, this is interesting. Yeah. This is the war inside my head. My top strength is relator. My bottom four are all in the execution domain. So there's the tug of war there. But Carey, I love helping people unlock the hidden places of the heart, the unhealed wounds, the unresolved disappointment, and then saying from the blank slate, who are you? What has God put on your heart? What are the dreams? And how do we get there? Because from an identity perspective, I'm such a strategy guy. I think if you could canvas every domain of my life, one of the things that pervades all is I'm highly strategic. So I love taking complex and making it simple. I love when people ask me, hey, I'm really struggling with this. How do I create a system that's going to make this work out? In fact, I heard John Maxwell say this years ago. Most of the issues we face in life probably aren't as much people issues as they are systems issues. And I'm like, yeah, that's so true for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is good. And I would encourage every listener to ask yourself these questions, because there are certain things that when you do them, they have an incredible impact. Yeah. So for me, I've been a content creator my whole life. When I was in law, it was prepping for court. When I was a pastor, it was prepping for Sunday, having a great message, a great series, having an aligned team, and making sure we had the resources available to do the work that we were called to do, financial resources and volunteer resources. Now as a content creator, it's prepping for my podcast, writing books, writing articles, writing talks. And that's what I'm best at. And that has a disproportionate impact. If I do those things well, everything's going to work out okay. If I do my inbox well and blow my communication, that's probably not going to work out okay for me. So what you do when you're doing what you're best at, when you're at your best, is you take all that really significant work and you put it in your green zone, into your peak hours. And what a lot of people do, and this is where people get blown up, is mine is in the morning. You're a morning person,
very
Chris,
much
or
so.
afternoon?
Oh, yeah.
Morning. Okay.
I'm a zombie by 10 at night, Carey.
Me too. I'm like, don't put TV on. I'll just fall asleep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a morning person. What I used to do is I used to have breakfast meetings. I used to work out in the morning. So I would maybe, go for a bike ride first thing Monday morning, then have a breakfast meeting Tuesday, then have a one-on-one Wednesday. Meanwhile, I've got to write a message, or meanwhile, I got to write a chapter in my book, or meanwhile, I got a blog post due. And I would not strategically spend my green zone. And so I'd end up doing these random things. And then my most important work was still due at 4:00. It's like, oh, I never got to that blog post, because no one's calling me saying, hey, have you got that blog post done? Hey, have you finished Sunday's message? Hey, are you done? Like, nobody's emailing me doing that. They're like, hey, Carey, can you do this? Hey, Carey, can you do that? And so I got just caught in this whirlwind, this stress spiral. And what I did was I started blocking out my green zone every day. And if you look at my calendar, it says writing or strategic planning. And now if you say, Carey, are you available in the morning? I'm like, actually, I can't make it, Christopher. I'm really sorry. I have an appointment. I have a commitment. The commitment is to myself. The commitment is to my calling. But then I just sit there undistracted, write for a couple of hours. Sometimes I will do a one-on-one meeting if it's really important in my green zone. And when you get that done, oh my goodness, everything else just kind of takes care of itself. So that's the key to doing what you're best at when you're at your best. Because otherwise, what happens? If your most important work is not done at 3:30 in the afternoon, you've already gone through your afternoon slump. You're teetering on your red zone. At that point, you come home, and for a lot of us who live in families, who pays the price for that? Your wife, your kids, your spouse. Your day off goes up in flames because, well, I haven't got that done yet, so I got to work on it just in the morning. Or you're at the beach on vacation and you've got this massive project due. So even if you're not opening your laptop, that is in the back of your head and you're not really relaxing. When you start shifting your most important work to your green zone, whenever that is, morning, afternoon, evening, you get it done when you're sharp, you're focused, you're clear, you're in the flow. You're, number one, going to produce better work.
For sure.
Number two, you've got your most important stuff done. So the rest of the day, yeah, you can go to that meeting, whether it's energizing or not. You can take a nap during your red zone. It's fine because you got the big fish fried. And now you can go home and have some energy left in the tank. So when I started making those changes, that's when everything started to turn around.
Oh, it's so good. And again, folks, wintoday.tv/episode 257, Carey Nieuwhof's brand new book, At Your Best. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. So just to recap, let's rewind the tape a second. We talked about self-awareness, self-regulation. Now we've kind of turned the page to energy management. And this is really the secret, Carey, that you tip your hat to regarding top performers. You know, it's not just productivity or goal setting. It's truly energy management. But I want to stay where you just took us. The stress spiral. I was really intrigued when I read that in the book because I think there are layers deep that we don't often recognize. You want to take us inside the stress spiral?
The stress spiral is where I think 80-90% of the population lives.
Okay.
And it's, you're in the stress spiral when you feel overwhelmed, overcommitted, and overworked. It's like, I just got so much stuff going on. I said yes to too many things in your personal life and in your work life. And I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. And usually, if you want a diagnosis, it comes from having unfocused time, unleveraged energy, and hijacked priorities. So your time is not focused. You don't even know when your green zone is. You don't know when your red zone is. You kind of know, but you're not doing anything about it. You haven't applied it. Unleveraged energy, you know intuitively that your energy waxes and wanes over the course of the day, but you're not cooperating with it. You're competing with it. It's like 2 more cups of coffee. I'm going to get through this slump in the day, try to grind through my work. So you're not leveraging your energy, and low energy can be leveraged. So know that it's not just your high energy. Use your low energy for your least important things, which kind of makes sense when you say it out loud. And then priorities, you can have a perfect theory. Like this has been a nice theoretical exercise.
Yeah.
But then you got somebody knocking on your door going, I need to meet with you right now. And then you've got your phone's exploding. You've got 17 unread texts because these people need this right now. And what do you do about all those priorities because they blow up your perfectly crafted plan? So that's a stress spiral, and that's how most of us live.
Does it require, for us to address the stress spiral, do we need to start at the baseline? In other words, the top of the spiral won't really find resolution until we go a few layers deep. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so you got to focus your time, you got to leverage your energy, and you've got to realize your priorities. And if you want with priorities, we can talk about that because I thought that would be a small part of the book. It turned out to be the biggest section because that's where you have this, you did this great time management class and, now I'm going to crush it, or you have your calendar all mapped out. But people keep blowing up your priorities because here's what's true about life, Chris, is nobody will ever ask you to accomplish your most important priorities. They will only ask you to accomplish theirs. So every time you get an email, every time you get a text, every time you get a knock on the door, it's someone going, can you do this for me? And before you think, please leave me alone, world, and you're being terrible, you do exactly the same thing. If I ever message you, I want something from you. That is the way life works. What happens, it was hard enough in the old office when everybody was in person. Now with digital devices, you get barraged, like deluged with those requests 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
As you were researching At Your Best, I'd love to know if there are maybe a few key new discoveries you gained about energy management, because I'm starting to hear this phrase throughout culture and even in various business journals and whatnot. Any new discoveries about energy management that you might have overlooked previously, Carey, or you just didn't know before?
Well, I had started thinking about energy management around the time of my burnout. And that's where I really started to notice some changes. I think what shocked me as I dug deep for the book is that it's that what I experienced anecdotally was actually more universal and scientifically proven. So it's not just, I'm not like I thought at first I was an inferior human being because I only had 3 to 5 productive hours and I get paid for 8. Now, I'm not leaving after 5 hours. I'm still, putting in the work. but I felt like a bit of a fraud. So it was reassuring to know, oh, I'm not alone. This is every other human being that walks the planet. But then it was really interesting to discover that science would say the same thing. So Cal Newport, who is a researcher, and in deep work, he sets the number at 4. He says you have the capacity for 4 hours of deep work a day, and time block around that. Other researchers say it's 3 to 5 hours, and in my experience, it's 3 to 5 hours. So this is a hard limit.
Okay.
This is not something that you, the overachiever, will be able to get past. I mean, maybe, sure, you can say, well, there was that one day where I wrote for 8 hours and it was great work. Yeah, there was that one day, but you have 364 others, so you're not going to get through it. So I learned that about energy management, preparing the book. And then the other thing was just the depth of people caught in the stress spiral.
Yeah.
I did not, when I first started developing this material, and it was years in the making, I thought that I was writing a book for people who were 40 and over. It's like, hey, if you're a bit cynical, burned out, tired, this will help. And then I realized, oh no, this is something 20 and 30-year-olds struggle with and teenagers struggle with.
Yeah, sure.
So that really surprised me as I wrote the book.
Carey, anything else that you want to share about priorities? You had mentioned like that's a huge chunk of the book, but I just want to make sure I give you space to talk your heart out about that. It's obviously a passion point for you. Is there anything else we need to hear from you regarding priorities and managing those?
Leaders have to learn how to say no. And it's really painful. So I spent a lot of time in At Your Best explaining exactly how to do that. But let me give a couple of quick strategies. First, you want to learn how to say no nicely. So the reality is for most leaders, for every capable leader, the demands on your time will always exceed the time available. And if you don't decide ahead of time how to spend your time, someone else will decide for you. So you're always going to get more requests than you can accommodate unless you're just starting out. I mean, I remember the first time when I started my sort of adult ministry in churches, we had real tiny churches. There were 6 people, 14 people, and 23 people attending the 3 churches. I had lots of time. I was trying to invent things to do. I haven't had that problem in 25 years, okay? As soon as the church started to grow, now, leaders access the content I produce 1.5 million times a month. I'm not running out of options and opportunities. I have lots of opportunities. So you got to learn how to say no. And you can systematize that. So you need to decide. Categorical decision making, a very public example of that was Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg always wear the same thing. You ever notice that? Zuck's always in a t-shirt.
I do.
Steve Jobs always had the black mock turtleneck and the khaki pants.
That's it.
Right? So what is that? It's not like these guys can't afford a wardrobe. They probably could both afford a wardrobe. It is decision fatigue. It's deciding ahead of time, this is what I'm going to wear. Then I wake up in the morning. It's like having the same thing for breakfast every day. I have the same thing for breakfast every day.
Yeah,
I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, me too.
I don't have to think about it, right?
Yep.
So that's categorical decision making. I've decided this is my wardrobe. This is less about your wardrobe and more about your life. So I decided when I realized, breakfast meetings compete with my green zone, that I don't do breakfast meetings. If I'm going to do a breakfast meeting, it's either my day off or you're really special. It's an exception to the rule. I don't do breakfast meetings anymore. Generally speaking, unless I'm trying to generate creative ideas, I don't do my exercise in the morning either, because that's my best time to produce things. So I will do my exercise in the afternoon or evening when I'm already tired anyway. That's categorical decision making. Another would be, I don't do these kinds of meetings. I don't do meetings longer than an hour. I don't do meetings with outside people. So I'm a public speaker.
You're right.
I have rules about subjects I speak on and subjects I don't. If you ask me to preach, even though I'm a preacher, I don't do sermons. Now, I'll do it in my home church, but if you're like, hey, will you preach the weekend? The answer is already no, because I've already decided ahead of time based on my calling. Based on what I'm supposed to do in the season, I've already decided. Do you know how easy that makes team decision making? Because when my team is fielding all these requests, I've already got filters out there and they know it's an automatic no. Now, you want to say that nicely. Thank you so much for the invitation. Really appreciate it. Carey would love to do it. However, he is not doing any preaching in this season. I hope you find someone else. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Something like that, right? So you're not a creep about it, but that's categorical decision making. The other thing you have to do, and maybe we can leave it here, Christopher,
sure,
is you got to stop the principal hijacker. You can get rid of people. You can make categorical decisions.
Sure.
I have a whole section in the book about who you should meet with and who you shouldn't. Most of us spend most of our people time meeting with the wrong people. We're always meeting with underperformers, always meeting with the guy who's late, the people who want to meet with us. You should learn how to say no to those meetings because you're not making any progress in those meetings. And say yes to your top performers. Who's your top volunteer? Who's your top team member? Who's your top donor? Chances are they never ask to meet with you. Think about it. Your best people never do. But you should be meeting with them. You should be spending 80% of your people time with those top performers because they give you 80% of your results. And you leave those meetings feeling energized, and so do they. And your mission gets bigger. So there's all those hacks on priority management. So that's who should be in your calendar, not all the wrong people, the drama kings and drama queens and the people who are like, opposed to this and opposed to that. They are the underperforming staff member or volunteer who's always late and never gets it done on time. You meet with them once. If it doesn't work, great. You didn't help them and you deal with the situation in a different way. So lots of hacks on that. But you know who the last interrupter is?
I'd love to hear.
It's you. It's you. Because you sit there in your green zone, you're like, great, I'm going to crack that chapter off. And next thing you know, you've been an hour into YouTube, or you're responding to your email, or you're responding to all the text messages that you missed. And what I've found, you've got to find a great environment. You got to be disciplined. Shut off all notifications on all devices because you really don't need to know what's happening in the world because it's probably still going to be here tomorrow. And then just focus, go into the zone, get your work done, come out of your green zone. And you've just slayed the biggest dragons. You have just done your most important work. On days when I do this well, I can almost go home at that point. I'm like, all right, the Forbes interview is all ready to go. The webinar is ready. It's prepared. It's finished. The podcast questions are prepped and sent. What else you got, Day? And by that point, you'll have a meeting or you'll have this or you'll have that or some email to churn through. And you churn through that, but you got your big stuff done. And then when you get home, you're present for the people that matter most. Or you can go do your run with some energy.
Carey, it's so good, and what a rich conversation this has been. It's so enlivening for me because you're an interviewer, you have a podcast, I do this as well. So you get two people who interview people together, and what a rich conversation, Carey. And again, folks,
you're very good at it. So thank you, Christopher.
Carey, thank you. I mean, honestly, I look up to you so much, and you're one of those key mentors. I told Ken Coleman when I was in Nashville in 2019, I said, listen, dude, I learned how to do this from you, and I'd throw you in that ring as well, Carey. I mean, you're a masterful question asker, and I learn a lot from you. You give me the masterclass on question asking, so I'm so grateful for you.
Just be curious. That'll lead you down the road. It'll take you great places.
I love it. Well, folks, wintoday.tv/episode 257, At Your Best, How to Get Time, Energy, and Priorities Working in Your Favor. He is Carey Nieuwhof. Carey, what a joy. I appreciate you. I'm so thankful for your life and your impact upon mine. How can people stay connected to you?
Yeah, well, we got some special bonuses for anybody who's interested in the book, some freebies, and also if you pre-order, we put a lot of heart and soul into a master class. So sometimes you hear it, it's something a guy shot on his iPhone, in his basement, which actually I'm coming to you from my basement, so there's nothing wrong with basement.
That's right.
No, we hired a film crew.
That's great.
Did a lot of work on this master class. If you're listening to this episode before the book releases on September 14th, 2021, you can get it for free with a pre-order.
Wow.
And there's some other bonuses as well. That'll actually give you early access to the content. So whether you do the audiobook, the book itself, or whatever, go to atyourbesttoday.com. So just remember the today, atyourbesttoday.com. And you can get all that for free. And so we're doing that for anyone who pre-orders. And you can find that sort of a gateway into everything I do, or you can go to careynieuwhof.com. And if you don't know how to spell it, you'll get there eventually.
You sure will. And guys, we're going to put links to all Carey's resources in the show notes. Again, wintoday.tv/episode 257. Carey, before I let you go, tell people where to take the Burnout Test, because I took it myself and I landed at mid.
How are you doing?
So,
are you going to share?
Yeah, I landed at mid. So
okay.
I was like, I have some things to work on, but I really want people watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast here to take that, because, again, early in the conversation, we talked about self-awareness, self-regulation, energy management. This is a key tool. Tell people where to take that.
Yeah, so you can do that at yourbesttoday.com as well. It's a gateway into everything. And you know what? The thing about mid-grade burnout, and this is my working definition of it, it's the functions of life continue, but the joy of life is gone. And if you find yourself there, you're getting up, you're going to work every day, but the fun's out of it, the joy's out of it, the bounce is out of your step. The good news is, if you put the framework that we talked about into place, you're going to find that soon enough.
Carey, what a joy. Thank you so much for taking time for me. Man, I feel so honored that you would make time for me.
Well, of course, Christopher. Yeah. Really happy, very, very supportive of you and your work, and really grateful for you and the contribution you're making to so many leaders. So thank you.
Thank you, Carey.